Well, folks, welcome back to Boss Economics World, where we slice through the spin, dice up the data, and serve you the raw, unfiltered truth about the economic dumpster fire we're all living through. I'm your host, the guy who's been screaming into the void about government mismanagement since before it was cool. And oh boy, do we have a doozy for you today. Buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into the latest circus act out of Washington, starring none other than Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's apparently moonlighting as a magician, because he's trying to make trillions in debt and a Moody's downgrade disappear with a wave of his hand. Spoiler alert, it's not working. Let's break this down, from the surface fluff to the deep, dark economic abyss beneath. Grab your popcorn, folks, this is gonna get spicy. Let's start with the headline grabber. Moody's Ratings just downgraded the U.S. credit rating, and Treasury Secretary Bessent's response is basically, meh, who cares? In fact, he went on Meet the Press and called Moody's a lagging indicator, like it's some outdated fashion trend instead of, a warning siren about the fiscal health of the world's largest economy. And then, in true Boss Economics World fashion, he doubled down by saying, Qatar doesn't care, Saudi doesn't care, the UAE doesn't care. Oh, really, Scott? Because last time I checked, the bond market does care, and they're the ones who actually keep this debt-ridden ship afloat. Now, let's give credit where it's due. Bessent's not wrong that the U.S. didn't get into this mess overnight. The national debt has ballooned to a jaw-dropping $36 trillion as of 2025, according to the U.S. Treasury Department's latest data. That's right, folks, $36 trillion. To put that in perspective, if you stacked $36 trillion in dollar bills, you could build a staircase to the moon, and still have enough left over to wallpaper Mar-a-Lago. But here's the kicker, Bessent wants to pin this all on the Biden administration's spending over the past 4 years. Sure, Biden's administration didn't exactly tighten the purse strings, with deficits averaging $2 trillion annually, according to the Congressional Budget Office, CBO. But let's not pretend the Trump administration was a beacon of fiscal responsibility. Remember the 2017 tax cuts that added $1.9 trillion to the debt over a decade, per the CBO? Or the COVID-era stimulus packages that both parties cheered on like it was free candy? This debt monster is a bipartisan creation, folks, but Bessent's playing the blame game like a pro. Now, let's talk about the real economic pain point for everyday folks, inflation. Bessent seems to think tariffs are no big deal, even as Walmart, the world's largest retailer, warns that higher import taxes are forcing them to raise prices. President Trump, in his infinite wisdom, chimed in on Twitter, X, saying Walmart should just eat the tariffs. Oh, sure, Don, just eat billions in additional costs, no problem. I mean, why didn't we think of that? Maybe because businesses don't eat costs, they pass them on to you, the consumer. And guess what? That's exactly what's happening. Let's break this down with some hard data. The Trump administration's latest tariff hikes, announced on April 2, 2025, slapped a 25% tariff on a wide range of imported goods, from electronics to clothing. According to a 2025 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBR, tariffs like these increase consumer prices by an average of 0.4% for every 10% tariff hike. So, a 25% tariff? That's a 1% jump in prices, folks, and that's before you factor in the ripple effects across supply chains. Walmart CEO, Doug McMillon, confirmed on their latest earnings call that they're already planning price increases on everything from toys to TVs. And Bessent's response? Oh, they're just exaggerating for the earnings call. Right, Scott, because multinational corporations love scaring investors for fun. But here's the real kicker, Bessent claims inflation is coming down, for the first time in 4 years. Let's fact-check that, shall we? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, peaked at 9.1% in June 2022 but had already started declining under Biden, hitting 3% by mid-2024. So, no, Scott, inflation didn't just start coming down under Trump 2.0, it's been cooling for over a year, thanks to the Federal Reserve's aggressive rate hikes, not your tariff tantrums. And speaking of the Fed, they're not exactly waving pom-poms for your tariff plans. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, in his May 2025 testimony to Congress, said tariffs could reignite inflationary pressures, especially if other countries retaliate. But hey, why let facts ruin a good narrative, right? Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this isn't just about tariffs or Moody's downgrades, it's about the government's chronic mismanagement of the economy, which is pushing us closer to a full-blown recession. Bessent keeps touting the Trump administration's plan to lower federal spending and grow the economy, but where's the beef? The 2025 federal budget, passed in March, projects a deficit of $1.8 trillion, according to the CBO. That's right, despite all the tough talk, spending is still out of control, with no serious plan to rein it in. And on the growth front? The International Monetary Fund, IMF, just downgraded its 2025 U.S. GDP growth forecast to 1.7%, citing, you guessed it, trade tensions and fiscal uncertainty. Compare that to the global average of 3.2%, and it's clear the US is lagging behind. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about the bond market, because that's where the real fireworks are happening. A Moody's downgrade isn't just a slap on the wrist, it signals to investors that US debt is riskier, which means higher borrowing costs. Yields on 10-year Treasury notes have already spiked to 4.5% as of May 2025, up from 3.8% a year ago, according to Bloomberg data. Higher yields mean higher interest payments on that $36 trillion debt pile, which the CBO estimates will eat up 23% of federal revenue by 2030. That's right, folks, nearly a quarter of your tax dollars will go to servicing debt, not schools, not roads, not healthcare. And who's paying for that? You, me, and every hardworking American who's already struggling to afford groceries. Now, let's talk about the global stage, because Bessent's Tariff Tough Guy Act isn't just hurting American wallets, it's destabilizing the world economy. Take the so-called tariff truce with China, announced just last week. Bessent bragged about having a mechanism in place to continue talks, but let's be real, China's not exactly quaking in its boots. According to the U.S. Trade Representative's 2025 report, China has already retaliated by slapping 20% tariffs on $50 billion worth of U.S. exports, including soybeans and machinery, hitting American farmers and manufacturers hard. And for other countries? Bessent's basically saying, negotiate in good faith, or get a tariff letter in the mail. Gee, Scott, nothing screams global cooperation like unilateral threats, right? And let's not forget the Russia sanctions drama. Bessent dodged questions about what's next, saying, we'll see what happens when both sides get to the table. But here's the thing, sanctions aren't just about geopolitics, they're economic weapons, and they're backfiring. A 2025 study by the Peterson Institute for International Economics found that U.S. sanctions on Russia have increased energy prices by 15% globally, fueling inflation and hurting American consumers. So, while Trump and Bessent play tough guys, the rest of us are stuck paying $5 a gallon for gas. Thanks, guys. So, where does this leave us, folks? Let's connect the dots. A Moody's downgrade signals fiscal recklessness, tariffs are reigniting inflation, and global trade tensions are stifling growth. The Conference Board's leading economic index, a key recession predictor, has been declining for 6 straight months as of May 2025, signaling a 70% chance of a recession within the next year. And what's the government doing? Pointing fingers, slapping tariffs, and pretending everything's fine. This, ladies and gentlemen, is textbook government mismanagement, and it's driving us straight into an economic ditch. Here's the deal, folks, you don't need a PhD in economics to see what's happening. The numbers don't lie, even if the politicians do. So, what can you do? First, hold your elected officials accountable, demand real fiscal reform, not just empty promises. Second, protect your own finances, diversify your investments, hedge against inflation, and brace for higher costs. And third, keep watching Boss Economics World, because we'll keep calling out the nonsense, breaking down the data, and giving you the tools to survive this economic roller coaster. Until next time, folks, stay savvy, stay skeptical, and remember, when the government says, don't worry, that's when you should worry the most.